Go Bobcats.
Well, first, let me thank all of you for coming. When I sat down with my mother about 5 years ago and planned her will, I never thought that this day would be here. And, oh man, I almost touched this now. But I'm honored that you all are here because I know how much she was loved, and the family thanks you for being here. And my name is Keith Needham. I'm my mom's youngest son, and here on the front row is my niece, Sierra. This is my older brother, Steve, and his wife, Stephanie, and my nephew, Dustin. And this is my father, Doug. And we're all just so honored that you're here. And I want to recognize some people who are here just because you came so far. So I'm going to ask you, if you drove over 100 miles to get here, would you, if you can, please stand? If you drove over 100 miles to get here, would you please give them a hand clap? And then I didn't see Joycelyn come in, and she may have been called out on an emergency, but I wanted to recognize her. She's not here, but I'll tell you a little story about her that's interesting. And the last 2 weeks that my mom was alive, I had talked to her. I had been here just about every weekend since May with her. And I told her, I said, now Mom, if it gets to the point that you're not able to care for yourself physically the way you need to be, I'm going to make sure you're cared for. And so I was realizing how much trouble she was having getting in and out of the shower at that point. And so we called in Joycelyn, and we didn't know who she was. And when she walked in, before she came, my mom's primary caregiver, the nurse Judy, turned to me and she said, you'll find this is so Melba Needham. She said to me, now Joycelyn is black, and we need to make sure that it's okay that she comes in here and cares for your mother. And before I could say anything, from the other side of the room, I heard, hey, we don't talk like that in this house. And I turned around, and then Judy said to my mom, she said, Mrs. Needham, we are required to ask that because there are some people who do not want to have people of different ethnicities come in and take care of them. And my mom just bolted out, 2 weeks from death. She said, well, having to ask that question just leads credence to the fools you have to ask it for. So I wanted Joycelyn to give her something, but she's not here, but I thank her for that. And then also I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask you actually to come forward because you came such a long way. And those are the delegation from the Texas State Bobcat football team. So Ishmael Davis, if you'll come up, Louie Cava, and Kareem Berry. Kareem has been my salvation the last week because there have been many times I have texted him and I've said something like, I'm dying. And he's called me. And they had practice this morning at 5. And did they continue after you left? They let you go, so the coach let them go, but they had practice this morning at 5, and then after 5, they left and got a shower and got in the car immediately and made their way here. And I want to tell you guys, I love you. Yes. Thank you. You have meant so much to me in the past year, and I'll never forget what you've done for me. And another person I want to recognize is Duber. Duber, are you back there? Wave at me. Would you come down here and I'll tell you why I'm recognizing him in just a minute. But when we got my mom's prognosis in May that she wouldn't live more than a year, there was a lot of stuff to be done. And I could only be here on the weekends. And it was hard getting her back and forth to chemotherapy every week. And there were so many times that my mom took me aside in those early days and told me that her exact words were, Duber is my other son, Duber is my cousin. And so Duber, I want to thank you from the family from the bottom of my heart, and your wife Stephanie, who helped sometimes as well, to get my mom to chemotherapy. There were others who helped, but 99% of the time, it was Duber who gave up his Thursdays and took my mom to Houston so that she could have chemotherapy, and that extended her life by about 6 months. And so Duber, thank you for that. And then one more person I want to recognize is my dad. My dad gave up his life the last 8 months. Take care of my mom. I'm sorry. And I never saw anything like it in my family's life because my mom was always the caretaker. But when she got sick, my dad took over everything. He took care of the house. He cleaned the house. He took care of the animals. And let me tell you, we have animals. He took care of the yard, the acre and a half, and then the last 2 weeks of his life, of my mom's life, excuse me, my mom could not, she was immobile, and my father had to carry her. And I was there on the weekends to help him, but during the week he had to do it himself because she couldn't move by herself. And it was hard because the cancer had spread all over her body. And so anywhere we touched her, she would scream in pain. My father carried her. He moved her himself. He's suffering physically now because of that, but he will recover. There was a picture that I had been looking for years that I couldn't find, that I wanted to present to him today, and I found it last week. It's a picture that was taken when my mom was managing Moorhead Grocery in Wadsworth. Anybody who knew my mother knew that she was very beautiful. And I love this picture because it's a picture of my mom, and you won't be able to see it, but it'll be in the slideshow later. It's a picture of my mom from behind. And her hair is just flawless, as it always was. And she's slow dancing with my father. And every time I see this photo, I know marriage works. 56 years of it worked. And Daddy, I love you, but even more than that, I am so proud of you for what you've done for the last 8 months. So I got this, and I want you to have it. All of you knew my mom, or most of you at least knew my mom, and you know that she created a legacy that will far outlive her. She was a lover of people, and people loved her. And today what I want to do, instead of talking so much about my mom's death, I want to talk about the legacy that she has left and the things that will be remembered about her. And I want to read one scripture to you. I found this the other day, and when I did, I said, oh my Lord, King Solomon knew my mom. But in this scripture, and I'm reading from the original Hebrew here, I want it to be accurate. It says, my son, reject not nor forsake the teachings of your mother, for they are a victor's chaplet, a garland of grace upon your head, and they are chains and pendants of gold, worn by kings for your neck. And when I read that they are chains and pendants of gold worn about your neck, I said to myself when I read that scripture, I said, oh my, I am weighted down. Because my mother taught me lessons that I will carry with me beyond this room throughout the rest of my life. And I'm looking at you out there, and all of you are shaking your heads, and you weren't even her children. And so that's just absolutely incredible to me. And the first thing I want to say, a lesson that my mother taught me was to be a caretaker. And You know, my first memory as a child was being 3 years old in Wadsworth, Texas. My mother had had a major surgery. And I had been plaguing her all morning to allow me to go into the backyard and play. We had a very small backyard, smaller than this area that's just here at the front of the chapel. And I finally convinced her to let me go out, but she had warned me to be careful because overnight it had rained and there was a fire ant mound that had been built into the entrance to the gate into our backyard. And so I went out and played for a little while until I thought it's safe to, not adhere to her advice anymore. And so as soon as I thought it was safe, I decided to go in that direction. And when I did, I tripped. And when I tripped, I catapulted myself headfirst into a fire ant mound that was about 3 feet high. And it was as tall as I was. And within a second, the ants had swarmed my body. They had gone into my hair. They went through my clothes. They went through my socks. I was being bitten from head to toe by fire ants. It was nightmarish. I remember the pain, but I only remember it for 1 second because I didn't know that my mom was watching me through the kitchen window. And within a second, as she had staples from here all the way down, because she had a major surgery. Within a second, she had just flown off of that back porch, and she grabbed me by the hand, and she picked me up by one arm and turned the water hose on, and she sprayed the fire ants off of me. Ripped all my clothes off and sprayed the fire ants off of me, and then took me inside. And I remember these 2 fingers on her right hand, she put salve all over me. And that moment, that's my first memory. And my first memory of my mom is that she is a caretaker. She takes care of me. She takes care of my brother. She takes care of my father. She takes care of everyone. In May, when we got our first prognosis, and it was a pretty bad prognosis, but certainly not what we were going to end up with. When we went in to get that first prognosis, we sat across from Dr. Sutton, and he came in and he said, "Well, Mrs. Needham," and she said, "Please call me Melba." And she said, "Okay, Melba," and Mr. Needham. And I said, "If you're calling her Melba, you got to call me Keith," because she's older than I am. And he said, "Okay, Melba, Keith, I don't have the best of news for you." He said, "The cancer has filled your whole bladder. So we're going to have to remove your bladder, but you'll still be able to live 10 or 15 more years." And in the last 8 months, my mother never cried one time. And that moment when he said, "We're going to have to remove your bladder," her eyes filled up with tears. I was watching her. And she thought for a moment, and I didn't say anything. I waited for her to speak. And she said, "Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. But I'll still be able to take care of my husband, and I'll still be able to take care of my sons and my daughter-in-law and my grandchildren. I'll still be able to help take care of that newborn great-grandchild." And then she named some people by name, and you're here. She said, "I'll still be able to cook for Mr. Sump. I'll still be able to cook for Mr. Barr. I'll still be able to care for all of our animals, and I'll still be able to feed the animals on the street that I don't think are getting enough food." And she went through the list, and I just let her. And I thought, my goodness, here this woman has just been told that she's going to have her bladder removed. And she's talking about taking care of other people. What a legacy. This chain represents that to me. I'll add this in. You don't know, but since I was a little boy, my sister was killed by a drunk driver when she was 5 years old. So all my life, my mother has prepped me to take over caring for the graves in the cemeteries when she's gone. And I know where everyone is, but it was always interesting when we went to purchase the flowers for the graves. We always had to purchase hundreds of dollars of more than what we needed because we had to put flowers on graves of other people that didn't have flowers on them. Family members, friends of ours that lived far off and didn't have flowers on their graves, we put flowers on them. We did that at Christmas. We did that at Easter. We sometimes did it on Valentine's Day. We did it on Memorial Day. We went from Cedarville to the cemetery. I can't remember the name of it. Help me in Van Vleck, Rosemont Cemetery. And we did that. She was definitely a caretaker. And the last thing I'll say about that, in the last 10 years or 15 years of her life, combined with my father, they rescued more than 60 abandoned animals. They not only rescued them, they took care of them medically. They had them neutered or spayed. They bought their monthly heartworm pills. They fed them. They cared for them. We still have a whole bunch of them at the house. When my mom's dog died, I was working at the time, volunteering actually at the Humane Society of Southeast Texas, and we had come in a dog that was a Great Dane, and he was just huge, and no one would adopt him. His name at that time was Roscoe, and they were going to put him to sleep the next day, and they said, Keith, if you can find someone who will take him, we will give him to you, we'll neuter him and supply the first 6 months of all that he needs free of charge. And so I called my mom. This was, Daddy, you don't know this, but I called my mom. Our keyword was, are you alone? And she said, yes, I'm alone. She said, hold on a minute. And I heard the garage door open. That meant she had gone out to the garage. And she was sitting there, and I said, now, I know you said you'd never own another dog in your life because it hurts too bad when they go, but this is the situation. And I told her. And I said, now, if you don't take this dog, tomorrow the dog dies. And we had 150 dogs there, but this dog was huge, and it was just hurting me because it seems worse when a larger animal dies for some reason. And she said, bring him. She said, I got to go in and work on your day. So I called back later that afternoon and I said, how are things going? And she said, I told him I didn't care what he thought. We would get the dog. And I think my father actually they changed his name from Roscoe to Bosco, and I think my father actually got closer to that dog than my mom did. He died about a year ago, and it just about killed her and my father too. I asked my father last night, I came up here and had decorated, and I said, Daddy, what do you think Mama's doing now? And he said, I think that she's probably walking hand in hand with Tessie, her daughter, and I think on the other hand, she has Bosco. She taught me to take care of people. Another thing that my mother taught me was she taught me the lesson of unshakable faith. My second memory as a child is from 1971 or 1972. My mother, for some reason, decided it was time for me to get acquainted with God. And so she put me in the car. How many of you remember the old Texas Theater? Anybody remember that? She took me in the car, and she took me up, and I looked at the poster, and it said Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. It had just been re-released to theaters. She took me in, she set me down. I didn't know what was going on. I was only about 5 years old or so. And I sat down and I watched it, and I was pretty bored during the first half. And the second half, I got real interested when all the water was turning to blood, and then that sea parted. I was like, whoa. And I remember getting back into the car with my mom, 5 years old, and I asked these questions just like it was yesterday. I remember I said, Mama, I said, can God part a sea? She said, Keith, God can part a sea. I said, Mama, I just went through the list. Can God do this? Can God do this? And after I asked all the questions, I just kind of sat there. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, Keith, no matter what church you decide to attend, no matter what denomination you ever belong to, no matter what you do in life, you remember this. Your God can do anything. And anything that man tells you he cannot do is a lie. So as soon as the internet came out, in 1995, I got online. I purchased the poster that was outside of the theater when she took me to see the re-release of Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. And I keep it in my office, and I dare somebody to say something about it. Not just because of what it reminds me about God, but because of what it reminds me about the value of my mother and what she taught me. I value that she taught me that at an age where even though I wasn't young enough to understand everything, I'm 49 now. And I believe with all my heart, God can do anything. And anything that someone says he can't do is a lie. And I'll tell you one more thing. My niece is sitting here in the front row. When my niece was born, she had on her upper lip a birth defect. Do you remember that? And it was bright, bright red. And the doctors had said it wasn't anything to worry about, but that they would remove that birth defect when Sierra got old enough, and they would take that birth defect and remove it from her lip. Well, my mom, everywhere they went, people would say, because all of you coming in said, oh, your mom talked about you all the time. So everywhere they went, mom would say, this is my baby girl, Sierra. This is my baby girl, Sierra. Sierra was her baby girl. And I came home one week, and Sierra was as she was, and I came home about a month later, and the birth defect was gone. Just gone. Well, so I assumed she had had the surgery. And I said, when did Sierra have the surgery? She said she didn't. And I said, what happened to that birth defect? She said, I took care of it. And I thought, oh my God, she got a knife and cut it off. Y'all know my mom. No, I said, what do you mean you took care of it? She said, Keith, when Stephanie would drop that baby off over here at the house, I never sat down. At that time, they lived in managed apartments, and she said, I walked with that baby in my arms. I lifted that baby up above my head, and I said, Lord God, you can do anything. Would you please heal my baby girl of this birth defect? And she said after about a week, it had gone down about 1 centimeter. She said in about 2 weeks, it had gone down 2 centimeters. And she said it's been a month now, and it's completely gone. And now she doesn't have to have surgery on her lips. So Sierra, I'm going to give you 2 things. One of the things when I graduated from graduate school that my mother did, we went to the Riverwalk, and she had, at that time, a picture of Sierra. I remember pushing Sierra in that basket. I have a picture of it, and this shirt is so stained because she wore it for 23 years to work, and she didn't care. It's stained, but it's her DNA on it. And I thought it would mean more to you than anyone else in the world. And it says Momo's girl. And so I wanted you to have this and our favorite picture of Mama for you. So my mom taught me about caretaking. She taught me about faith. My mom taught me about, and all of you that are in here probably know this, about the lesson of a hard work ethic. I have never in my life met or even known or met anyone who worked harder than Melba Needham worked. When I was a little boy, she always had 2 jobs. One day she told me after I got older, we were sitting out in the garage, that we were poor when I was little. I didn't know we were poor because she worked 2 jobs and made sure we always had enough between her and my father. I thought we ate beans and cornbread 4 nights a week because it was a delicacy. I thought my father had 50 trot lines in the river just because it was so much fun to go out there and pull up the lines and get the fish off of them. I didn't know because she didn't let me know. But she worked so hard, and I'm looking here at 2 people I love very much, and that's James and Rosemary Mullen. And Rosemary particularly, when I was a little boy, I remember, Rosemary, you're like a second mom to me. My mom worked at Shipley Donuts for many years. She didn't have to be at work as early as she got there. I think she was supposed to be there at 5. She would get up at 3 to get there by 3:30. Because she told me one day, I said, why do you get there so early? You're getting up so early? She said, because that way I can make sure, and I suppose you still do, she said, we have to get the route ready because they deliver donuts everywhere to places around that don't have a donut shop. And she said, this way I can make double sure that all these people that are going to get their donuts in all the nearby towns are getting what they're supposed to get. And she said, anyway, I don't like those other women fixing the donuts and putting them in the boxes because they pinch the donuts. She said, I do it right. And, when my mom died, by the way, I will tell you, she still had on her fingertips burns from all the years she worked at Shipley Donuts from pulling those, because she wanted to put them in the box hot. She'd put those hot donuts in that box, and taking them out for the route. But she loved to work. She worked hard. When I decided that I was going to start playing the piano, how in the world were we going to afford a piano? And I don't know how she did it, but she went down to Collins' music store, and again, Melba Needham. She made a bargain with them, and she paid $10 a week, every week, for I don't know how many years until she paid off a piano. And that piano is now worth, I think, about $60,000. But she paid $10 a week on it. When I decided it was time to go to college, and I did so, she told me, we didn't have the money for college, she said, I want you to take out loans. She said, you take out the loans, she said, when you graduate, I will pay for them. For 10 years, my mother paid $20 a month, every month, on my college loans until they were paid off in 2004. And do you know, to this day, every place that I go to work, I get asked eventually by my employer, where on earth did you get your work ethic? Because I love to work. I would work, if I could go without sleeping, I'd work 24 hours a day. And I always say, my mother was the hardest working man. I get to tell them about Melba Needham. How many of you know I'm telling the truth? It's just water. Don't be upset, Mr. It's just water. I kicked it over. So the mom taught me the value of a hard work ethic. Their chains, their pendants about my neck. The fourth thing that she taught me about was loyalty. When we were growing up, my brother played baseball. My mother dragged me against my will to every conceivable baseball game from Little League to high school that had ever been played by any person in creation. I, to this day, don't know how we did it because she worked so often. And I'm thinking, when did we have time to go to baseball games? But that was my mom. Even though she was so busy, she never forgot her priority. And we would go to baseball games, baseball games, baseball games. And to this day, I cannot stand the baseball games on the television. It nauseates me. When I finally got old enough not to go, I remember the first game I missed was the game that my brother was pitching. And they finally decided I was old enough not to go, and I stayed home. And the batter hit the ball, and my brother caught the ball with his mouth. Knocked all his teeth out, and they were at the dentist's office having my brother's teeth surgically replaced, and my mom called me. And I said to her, the first game I missed, and something exciting happened. Then for me in elementary school, back then Bay City was just booming. You know, the nuclear plant was starting. There were about 50,000 people in town. And I was a member of the elementary school choir. We had about 500 people in that choir. And she came to every choir concert that we had. Then after that, I got into high school and I was in band. Back in those days, again, we had a big band, at least 200, 250 members. I know some of you are sitting there and I just saw your mouths fall open because, yeah, the band used to be that big here. And my one desire in life, she had taken me to my first football game, which I fell in love with in 1978 because her Sugar Bear was playing, and that was Cliff Mullen. And my best friend and I, Kim Mullen, would go and we'd sit down at the 50-yard line right there on the bleachers and we'd watch the band perform. And I remember turning to Kim and I said, one day, Kim, I'm going to be one of those people out there in white. I didn't know what they were called. They were called drum majors. And Kim looked at me kind of like, yeah, all right, look. And so when I got in high school and became a band member, you know, back then, Bay City's football team was just incredible. We went to playoffs every year, won the state championship one year. I mean, we had games from August until December. In all those years, my mother never missed one game. And there were many days when it was over 100 degrees outside. When we were out on the marching field in the afternoon at 2 p.m., our practice would start. I can remember it being so hot, we'd be standing at attention and we'd hear and we knew not to move because we'd get yelled at. That just meant somebody had fainted and they were being dragged off the field. And I remember I would look out the corner of my eyes and the blue Chrysler LeBaron was sitting there watching us practice. And my mother would be at her apartment across town and she could hear, we had about 30, 35 drummers at the time. And she could hear the drums. As soon as she heard the drums, she couldn't stand it. She told me she had to get in her car and get over there because it was so loud and she loved it. And she would listen to us. And there were many days when we would show up at that field at 6:30 in the morning. Well, before that was illegal, which is illegal now. We'd practice until 9 a.m. And there were many days at 6:35 I would look over and I saw the blue Chrysler LeBaron, and my mom was sitting there watching us practice. She was the most loyal mother, the most loyal person I have ever known in my life. And I wear that as a king's ransom around my neck. The next thing that my mother taught me was a lesson that you protect the people that you love under any circumstance and at any price. This is kind of funny, as most of my stories are about my mom. My mom and I had changed cars one weekend because I needed to have some work done. My father purchased my first car. I was the first person in my high school class to have a car. Thank you, Dad. I got a black Dodge Challenger. Oh my, back in the day, I was styling and profiling, had golden stripes on it. And I never thought I'd be the first one with the car. And I totaled it in about 2 months, but that's another story. But after I went to college, I still had that car and it needed some work. So my mom and I changed cars. And I took her Chrysler LeBaron back to what was then Southwest Texas State. And my mom took my Dodge Challenger to have work done on it. And so I came home the following Friday, and my mom was just always beautiful. She wasn't prideful. She felt it was her obligation to look her best when she walked out of the house. She would never go to Walmart with rollers in her hair, or flip-flops. And I can remember her so many times telling me, you don't leave this house until your shirt is stuffed in. That's how we were brought up, my brother and I. And she had a scratch on her face, and the makeup didn't cover it. And I looked at her and I said, well, what happened to you? And she said, you don't want to know. And she went back to cooking dinner because that's, in my memory and in my father's memory, it'll always be my mom cooking because she cooked constantly. And I said, no, what happened to your face? And she said, don't worry about it. Well, I knew my father hadn't done it. He knows better. So I played and pestered her till finally she told me this story. She said, well, I was driving down Sycamore. That's the street right here. And she said, there was a woman in front of me in this little car, and I was driving behind her, and she threw out an old Milwaukee beer can that landed on the hood of your car. And so I knew she needed to apologize to me. So she said, so I sped up and got in front of her and ran her off in the ditch. Of course, I'm standing there thinking, what on earth is this woman going to do next? She said, and I said, so what did you do? She said, well, I got out of the car so she could apologize to me. And my mom just made the assumption that this woman was going to apologize to her because it was the right thing to do. And she said, so I walked back to the car and she rolled down her window. And she didn't apologize to me. She cussed me. She said, can you believe that woman cussed me, Keith? So I reached through that window and I grabbed her by her shoulder pads, because back then everybody wore shoulder pads, and she said, I pulled her out of that car, and in the process of pulling her through the window, she reached up and scratched my face. So I threw her down on the ground and I just beat the mess out of her. And she said, she'll think twice before she throws a beer can out of her car again. And I just stood there. I said, so what did you do then? Mr. Barr, where are you? Mr. Barr? You'll appreciate this. She said, well, after that, I went to the police station and turned myself in. I said, what'd they tell you? They said, oh, Miss Needham, just go home. You know, it was just my car, and I tried to explain to her, Mom, don't risk your life for my car. She said, I risk my life. She said, I'd take any man in this town and bring him down. And I think she could. What she did, she taught me the value of protecting those that I love at any price. I don't know if I'd run a car off the road these days, but I will protect those that I love and do all that I can for them. The next thing that my mom taught me is unconditional love. This is the hardest part for me. One day my mom took me in the garage about 10 years ago. Well, it was right after we moved into that house, so I don't know how long ago that was, and she was talking to me about some things that were very personal that I won't share because she swore me to secrecy. But one of the things she told me, she said, Keith, there's one thing you need to remember if you don't remember anything else I've ever taught you. And I remember everything. But she said, when you lose your mama, when you lose your mama, you lose your best friend. She said, I knew that when my mama died. I want you to know that when I'm gone, you've lost your best friend.
And I wish that wasn't so, but I know it's so. Nobody will ever love you like I love you. And I'm so fortunate. I'm sorry. Because I knew that love for 49 years. And I know that I'll never be loved like that in my life. And Dustin, I didn't want to leave you out. She loved you so much. As soon as you were born, because she got a shirt made with Sierra's picture on it, she went down. She had this picture. They called her Momo. They said, this Momo belongs to Sierra and Dustin. A few years ago, I'll give this to you in just a minute. A few years ago, my mom called me and she was crying. And my mom didn't cry. So I didn't understand. She wasn't crying like I'm crying like a fool now. But I could tell she was upset. Dustin had gotten his first smartphone. And Dustin came over to eat dinner every day after school. And my mom called me because she didn't understand smartphones. She didn't know what they were doing. She said, I don't know what he's doing, but he's sitting there and he's constantly poking on that phone. And she said, he used to talk to me. He used to spend time with me. And she said, Keith, I'm not getting any younger and I'm losing time with my grandson. So I called Dustin that night, or maybe we were texting or instant messaging on Facebook, and I said, look, she doesn't understand about your generation being addicted to the cell phone. Stop it. And I said, when you go over there to eat dinner from now on, just leave your cell phone in your pocket. And about a week later, she called me. She said, guess what? She said, Dustin's not text messaging anymore. She knew what text messaging was then. And I said, that's good, I'm glad. And so she thinks she just stopped. Well, now she knows. Oh, no. So I wanted to give you this shirt that she had made when you were born, and also give you our favorite photo of her. My mother taught me the lesson of unfathomable strength. Unfathomable strength. So I was thinking some other word. Unfathomable strength. She's the strongest person I've ever known in my entire life, and I don't think I will ever know someone as strong as she is, again, for the rest of my life. In that same conversation when we were sitting in the garage, she was talking to me about Tessie, her firstborn daughter, who was killed at 5. And I asked her, because I could not imagine the pain, and I said, Mama, how in the world, after your daughter was killed, did you ever manage to get up and build this life that you built? I said, everybody in this town knows you, they love you. I said, I think most people would have been put in a home or something. And these were her words to me, and Steve, this is for you. She said, I looked over, and your brother was 3 feet from my bed, and he was playing. And I sat there and I looked at him for a minute, and I said, unless I shake off this depression, he won't have a mother. And that's what God put me here to do. So I took the covers, I pulled them off the bed, and when my foot hit the floor, I said, that's it. I will mourn for her, but I will be a mother at the same time. And that's the kind of strength that woman had that took her through her whole life. You know, she also, and many of you, if you've ever been to hear me preach in places, you know this is true. I've told my story so many times. She took me aside at least 3 or 4 times a year and told me my story of my life. When she found out that she was going to have another baby, the doctors told her that she couldn't have another baby. They told her that in the process of giving birth to me that I would die, and that she, in the process of giving birth to me, she would die, and that I would most likely die. They told her that they had done the x-rays, that I had no head, that I had no arms, and that I had no legs, and that it was not possible for me to be born. And things were different in those days. I guess laws were different in those days. And my mom had begun hemorrhaging very badly before she gave birth to me. And she had been put in the hospital. My dad at the time was working in the oil fields. And my mom told me that the doctors came in and they strapped her to the bed and decided that they were going to perform an abortion to save her life. And to this day, I don't know how she did this, but she told them, you're not going to perform abortion on me. And they said, no, we have to, because if we don't, you'll die, and we will be legally liable if you die and we don't perform this abortion. Somehow or another, my mother managed, with both of her arms strapped to the bed, to get the straps off. She got up, she put on her pants because she didn't like wearing dresses. She went outside of Matagorda General Hospital, which at that time was over near, I don't know what street that was, or near Walker Seed Garden Center used to be. And she stood on the corner. This was before cell phones. This was 1966. And she called my father from a payphone. He was working in the rice field. And she said, Doug, come get me. They're going to abort Keith. And she stood outside in the blaring sun for an hour and a half that it took my father to get from the rice fields, the oil fields, to where she was bleeding. And when he showed up, the blood had gone all through her pants. And for the rest of her pregnancy with me, she hemorrhaged like that. And then about 5 years, after you're 30, everything's 5 years. I can't remember time. But a few years back, when she was managing Moorhead Grocery, Dr. Barnes came through, who was the doctor that was supposed to abort me. And at that time, I had already graduated with my bachelor's degree. And of course, all of you, I'm sure, have seen that photo. Dr. Barnes came through, and she hadn't seen him in 25 years. And she said, hey, Dr. Barnes, I want to show you something. She pulled the picture out. She said, here's your baby with no head, no left arm, and no right arm, and no left leg, and no right leg. He just graduated summa cum laude with the highest honors from Texas State University. She was a woman of great strength. She was also a woman of great grace and dignity. Getting heavy up here. I don't know of anyone who had more grace than my mom. I'm sure there are people out there, but those who know her know the kind of grace that she had. In her last few weeks, friends would come by to visit with her, and you didn't know when you came by. The absolute maximum amount of time that my mom could sit up and speak to you without being in excruciating pain was about 1 minute. And people would come and they would stay 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And don't feel guilty about that. She was glad you came by. That was just in the last 2 weeks. And I remember when we finally had to start having hospice, and the hospice nurse had to come over and interview her, and she had to sit up for 4 hours answering questions. And at hour 4, I looked over, and this was the second time in my life that I saw this. My mom's eyes were watering. And I said, the interview's over. And I got up and took my mom to her bedroom and put her in the bed and came back and told the hospice nurse, any other questions, I'll answer. I have power of attorney, so I can answer those questions legally. And I continued to answer those questions. And I asked her later, I said, Mama, I said, you don't have to set up for when these people come by to visit you. They are your friends. They're your family. Tell them that you're in pain and tell them you need to lie down. Lie down and talk to them. And she told me, I'll never forget a word. She said, Keith, that's not how a lady behaves. A lady does not lie down and talk to company. A lady receives her visitors. And I'm a lady. I said, you're also a lady mom with terminal cancer and you've only got a few more months to live. I didn't know at the time, a few more weeks. But she refused to give up her grace and dignity. And I remember the hospice workers coming in, and in the last week, they would come in, and right before she lost her ability to talk, she'd be like, baby, do you need anything? To the workers, you need a cup of coffee? Doug, go in the kitchen and get her a cup of coffee. Don't just sit there. My mom was a woman of great dignity. My mom also taught me the lesson of the importance of humor. She was funny. And we had so many fun times together that I'll always remember. And I'll just tell you about one. One time I remember, I used to mess with my mom when we go to HEB. I won't tell you one story because it's kind of personal, but I'll tell you the other one. This was back before the days of scanning when the people used to have to punch the numbers into the register, you know? And what we do is you push your basket behind the counter and the front of the basket would open and the clerk would take your items and ring them up. So what I would do is I would stick things in the basket under the bread and under the the meat and stuff. And then my mom she'd be like, I didn't put that in that basket. And I would stand on the corner and just roll my eyes like, here we go again. And then I always liked to put one thing in her purse under her wallet, because when she would get ready to pay, that would come out and fall on the floor. And one day something fell out, some preparation H, I think it was. And she said, what in the world is this doing in my purse? And so I just looked at her, I said, we have a problem. I told the clerk, kleptomania. We've been to therapy and nothing seems to help. And of course she'd say, well, I'm gonna kill you. But she got even with me. I remember the week after that, I was a freshman in high school, and we went, at that time, met very early in the morning before sun ever rose for band, and she would be out, people would be standing outside the band hall, about 100 people waiting to go to the practice field. When you're a freshman in high school, the worst thing that can happen to you in life is for people to know that you have parents. And so my mom pulled up in the Chrysler LeBaron, and she let me out of the car, and I never said goodbye or anything. I just grabbed my trumpet and got out of the car as fast as I could. And I got out of the car and started up the sidewalk to the band hall, and she laid on the horn. Well, I just wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. I turned around, I went back to the car, and I jerked the door up. I said, what? She said, now you go have a good day, Mama. I slammed that car door, and I turned around, I was mad. I started walking back to the I turned around, I opened the car door, I said, what do you want? She said, did you forget to tell Mama goodbye? I said, bye. I slammed the car door. I thought, oh my God, just take me now, Lord. When's the second coming of Christ when you want it? And so I turned around, I went back and I opened the door. I said, Mama, what? She said, Mama loves you. You tell Mama you love Mama. I did. I said, Mama, I love you. Thank you. Please go home or go to work or go do something. And she did. I was really grateful about that. And the last thing I'll tell you this is my mom taught me this lesson of great importance. And that is never to forget the lessons that she taught me. And I never will forget the lessons that she taught me. 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I came home, and she was in the bedroom where she had chosen to be, away from my father at the time. And I had gone in and fixed the bedroom up real nice for her, and I called it her healing room. And I was putting my luggage into the room I slept in, and I heard her saying, Keith, Keith. And so I went in there and I opened the door and I said, yes, Mama. She said, come here. And I sat down on her walker, had a seat on it. And I sat down on the walker and she said, I need to tell you a story. I said, okay. She said, when I got pregnant with you, you weren't supposed to be born. She told me my story again.
Oh.
And then when she finished, she said, now, this is all going to be over really soon. And she said, I want you to remember this. It's going to be hard because you love me so much. But I don't want you to forever to forget that the reason you're here is because God has a purpose for you. And you can't spend the rest of your life mourning for me. You have to accomplish what you were put here on this earth to accomplish. And the reason I'm glad there's a delegation from the Texas State football team here is she said, those football players need you. She said, those students up there need you. That Department of English needs you. And those people that you go out to the weekends and preach to need you. She said, you have something to accomplish. And you are never to forget that you were put here for a reason. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And her speech had been slurred at that point. She was hard to understand. She was on so much medication. But she spoke as clearly as she could ever speak in her life in those final words that she said to me that day. I know that these chains are just worthless pieces of metal, probably, a penny. But to me, what they represent in my heart it's invaluable, because I will take this with me for the rest of my life. And if I live to be 110, I will always remember the lessons that my mother taught me. I'll tell you just a little bit of something about the final few hours of her life, and then we're going to end this with a slide. She told me she didn't want people looking at bad pictures of her, so I made sure the pictures were good. But in the final few hours of her life, you know, we kept getting phone calls from hospice saying, "This is it." And then we would get there, and she would live. And hospice would say, I remember one hospice worker said, "We've never missed it." She said, "I've been doing this for 30 years. We've never missed it for more than 30 minutes. And this is the third day we called you in to say this is it." They said, "We've never seen a woman with this much strength before." In fact, she had no pulse. She had no blood pressure. They couldn't detect it. But her heart was beating vibrantly. All the rest of her body had shut down except her brain. And she couldn't talk anymore, but they told us that she could hear us when we talked to her. So, of course, on Thursday of last week, I got a phone call about 2 in the afternoon, and they said, "We don't think she'll make it until you get here." So I just jumped in the car, threw everything in, and got here as quickly as I could, and ran in, and I fell on her like I always did around her neck, and I said, "Mama, I love you. I want you to know it's okay for you to go now. You've done what you're supposed to do. We're going to be all right. Everything's taken care of. You were the best mom in the whole world." And then she lived. And then the next day, the hospice worker said, "This is it." My brother came back over. Stephanie came back over. Dustin came back over. My father, we gathered around the bed. We did it again. She lived. That was my father's birthday. So I had been awake because I told my mom back in May, I said, "Mom, when you go, I want to be holding your hand." So I'd been holding her hand for 27 hours. I didn't even want to get up and go to the bathroom because I was afraid she would go while I was gone, and I didn't want to break that promise to her. But Saturday evening of last week, I was so tired, and Daddy, I don't know how in the world you managed, because I know how tired you must have been, but I told my father, I said, "Daddy, I'm going to go in the bedroom, and I'm going to lie down for just a minute." And I said, "Just for a moment, until I get my strength back, and I'll be back in here." And I honestly don't even remember touching the bed. I just went sound asleep. And I was awakened when some light came in the room. It was my father, and he was getting my dog out of the bedroom. And I sat up in bed. I said, "Is she alive?" And he said, "Yes, she's still alive." And it was 4:30 in the morning. And I said, "Well, we've been through this 3 times now. She's going to keep living." And I laid back down, and I just got a quickening in my heart that said, "Keith, you don't want to lay back down now." Well, Mama taught me that when it came her time and people came to get her, she wanted me to be dressed. She wanted me to be looking right, acting right. She didn't want to go out without going out in style. So I got up and I showered and I shampooed my hair and got myself dressed. And I went to her bedside and I held her hand. It was about 6 in the morning. My father sat there with me, and at 7:30, I turned to him. I said, "Daddy, you're so tired." I could tell, my father's face, I could tell his face was sagging. He was so tired. I said, "Daddy, you're so tired." I said, "Just lie down on the sofa and rest a minute." I said, "If there's any change, I'll let you know." And I don't think, immediately my father was asleep. And so my mother and I were sitting there, and I was holding her hand. And I had the computer in my lap. I wasn't doing anything. I was just looking at her. And I thought, this has been going on for 4 days now, and every breath that she took was a scream. And they told us that it didn't hurt. That was just part of the process. But it hurt us to hear her scream like that. So at 7:45, I got on Facebook and I typed a message that said, "Friends, I've been holding my mom's hand now for about 37 hours. Save that time I was sleeping. And I said, would you please pray for peace in our family?" And I hit enter. And that was 7:45. And 30 seconds. 90 seconds later, my mother took her last breath. And that was it. And when she did, I turned around and said, "Daddy, wake up. I think it's over." And he woke up, and we had a great moment then. I wasn't expecting this. Of course, I was beside myself crying, but my father did something that, Daddy, I will always remember this. Because he was crying very hard
But he put both of his hands up in praise to God. And he thanked, his words were, "Thank you, Jesus, for giving me the best wife of 66 years. And thank you that her suffering is now over." And it was. And I leaned in her ear and I told her how much I loved her again. And one song that she loved was "Boys to Men," a song from Mama. And on her 60th birthday, I had made a video show with that song on it. And I leaned over in her ear and I sang a song for Mama for her, as much as I could. And then I said these words to her. They just rolled out of me and I thought it was real interesting. I said, "Mama, the Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want. He's made you to lie down in green pastures. He has led you beside the still waters. He has restored your soul. Mama, He's led you in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, even though you walked through the valley of the shadow of death, you never feared evil, because He was with you. And His rod and His staff, they comforted you. Right in the very presence of your enemy, death, He prepared a table before you. And now, Mama, He has anointed your head with oil, and you're going to a place where your cup runs over with blessings. Goodness and mercy have followed you all the days of your life, Mama." And I said, "But now, you go and you live in the house of the Lord forever." And when I finished that, I felt her spirit, and it just left her body, and she was gone. And we had complete peace in our house. I knew then the body was just a shell. My mama was a servant. My mom was a wonderful wife of almost 56 years. She was a mother. She was a grandmother. And for 1 year, she was a great-grandmother. My mother was an unashamed, dogmatic servant of Jesus Christ. In one of our last conversations, I looked at her and I said, "Mom, are you ready for eternity?" It was the same day she gave me my story again. She said, "Yes, I'm ready." I said, "Who's your Lord?" She said, "Jesus Christ is my Lord." And I said, "Mama, the Bible says if you believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, and you confess with your mouth He is your Lord, then you'll be saved. And I just want you to have comfort and peace about where you're going." She would want me to tell you that today. That's why I'm telling you that. My mom was more than just a mother. She's more than I'll be able ever to explain to people in my whole life what she was to me and to my family. She was everything. I wanted to put together for her final tribute, and the last thing that we will share with you today is a photo slideshow of my mom and all the roles that she filled as one of the most beloved women I have ever known. And I simply call this my tribute to Melba, Louise, Needham. I hope you enjoy it.
Down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. When I am on your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Once again, I want to thank all of you for coming out today. What a tribute to my mother that all these people were here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with us today. And we'll never forget your kindness and your generosity and all that you've been to the family, particularly these past couple of weeks. At this time, I'm going to turn the service over back to the funeral director.
Wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. I just got my I know it's I know the name. I know the name. You're talking about. Yes. Yes. I was a little kid. Yeah. How about that? I still cry. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sir, you know I appreciate you being here.
All y'all, this family.
Rosemary, I love you. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. I hope so. I just felt like she said she's not crying. I'm like, I tried my best Thank you.
All y'all,
I appreciate you.
No, I'm still in the hospital. My husband retires. I still have mom days. My son's staying.
very proud.
Just a little bit old. Well, I noticed that. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
And I was off yesterday. I was off radio plays. First grade. I mean, she took me
I didn't know to pick wrong. Oh, Ernest, didn't you know this man?
Working on it.
You go fly
If I could get her to go with me, I would. That would be fantastic. Everything.
I'm looking
You
at
get away from the government. You get away from the government.
No, this is Renee.
Renee! I knew it was one of the two. I couldn't remember.
Oh, I tell you what, see, Darlene's a sister. Oh, you did a wonderful job.
Well, thank you.
We got issues.
I still have a couple more.
You know what?
Get ready for me. What was going to be what's cooking? Nice to meet you. I've met the other Renee. Yeah.
He's a nice boy.
Okay, well, very, thank you for coming. I appreciate you. You gotta get out of here. By the way, Renee, what's the name of the place where you're moving?
The legacy.
You're at the Legacy?
Yeah.
Of what part?
803.
I can hear that.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I was at your grandpa's and I thank you for being here. We have to clean the chapel out, which is probably going to take about an hour from now. And then the football players. Okay, that's fine. I'll be in touch in the next couple of days. I'll be in touch in the next couple of days. And all the hard work.
Yeah, but he ain't feel that yet. I'm so glad
I will be seeing
I
you.
love everyone.
Thank you. Pastor Phillips, this is
We
Pastor,
got
another
much
pastor.
that's all.
Thank you so much. It encouraged my heart while I was up here more than you will ever know in this life to see your face out there. You are the pastor.
I feel sorry for the boys next year. I'm right up against y'all. Y'all gonna hit them.
You had your best.
We're our best tackler.
Well, you know I love you. We're gonna go. Okay, it's gonna take us a while. We gotta get everything out of the chapel and it's in the back of my car. Yes, and so we gotta wait till everybody gets out of here, and then I'm gonna pull my car up right here.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to help with this, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna go out to the cemetery, accept flowers.
So were you thinking about it? I knew he was gonna show me he was gonna give that to you. And I was like, oh, I know. You wore it. I was just
Cook's gone.
Ish.
You'll find something. Guys like you always find a place to eat.
All right,
Thank you,
All
sir.
right, Ross.
I'll be over at the house once a week to help you eat anything.
Oh, yeah, I know. Finish up all this. Let's
It goes with your
Okay.
once in a while.
I'm glad y'all can make it down here and help us out.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Everybody just say, like,
I